Hello, Gene Schwimmer here. Welcome to today's vlog. Today I want to talk about a subject that I wanted to talk about yesterday but didn't have time, which was the Trump tax returns. Actually, not the returns, it's the tax transcripts that the IRS has, not the actual returns. But for all practical purposes, it's the same thing. It's the record of the taxes that Trump paid, the deductions that he claimed. But before I get into the specifics of Trump's tax transcripts, I want to share a general principle that applies to all taxpayers, rich and poor, because there is this misconception or a feeling or a belief among a lot of people, especially our Democratic friends, that there is something wrong necessarily with not paying any taxes. There is nothing wrong with having a zero tax liability if it's legal. This brings us to a famous judge of the late 40s, 1950s. His name was Learned Hand. It's an unusual name, but that was his name, Judge Learned Hand. He tried a lot of tax cases. There's a famous statement by him, and by the way, the reason I know this is because one of the advantages of watching my vlogs is my past experience. As I said before, I've had so many jobs in my lifetime, and one of those jobs was working for the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. It's basically what the American Medical Association is for doctors. It's the accountants' professional organization. I edited self-study courses. I won't bore you with the details of exactly what I did day to day in that job. I just want to make the point that because I did have that job, it allowed me to learn something about tax law, to work with accountants, to learn about the history of taxation and famous tax decisions, and in this case, a tax quote. So here's Judge Hand's quote. You'll notice some italicized text. That's me. I italicized some of the text for emphasis. So here's the quote. Over and over again, courts have said that there is nothing sinister in so arranging one's affairs as to keep taxes as low as possible. Everybody does so, rich or poor, and all do right. For nobody owes any public duty to pay more than the law demands. Taxes are enforced exactions, not voluntary contributions. To demand more in the name of morals is mere cant. That's the point that everybody has to keep in mind, that when we talk about Donald Trump or anybody else minimizing their taxes, or so-and-so, Mr. Rich guy didn't pay his fair share. If he paid what the law required, he paid his fair share. He is not obligated. There is no patriotic duty to contribute. There is no patriotic duty to pay more than the law requires you to pay. And you are allowed to use any legal maneuver, or you can call it a loophole. If the loophole is in the law, if Congress missed something and there's a loophole in the law, you are perfectly within your rights to exploit those loopholes. If it's a problem, then it's up to Congress to change the law or write a new law, which they are very good at. Last time I checked, we had more than 10,000 tax regulations or tax laws. So they know how to pass a law if they want to. Now we get to Donald Trump. They're making 2 points, that he paid no taxes for a number of years and that he had a lot of losses for very many years. On the matter of losses, as has been reported, Donald Trump himself discussed his past losses, $1 billion in losses, on his old reality TV show, The Apprentice, 15 years ago. So this is not news. This big scoop that the New York Times supposedly had, that is not news. Now, I told you that I worked for the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. I've also told you that I'm a licensed real estate broker. I'm licensed in New York and New Jersey. So I know something about the real estate business, and my specialty is commercial real estate. I've never had personal dealings with Donald Trump, but obviously I've heard about him, and I know what the real estate market was like in those days, the days that he had these big losses. There was a recession in the early 90s. I guess some people have forgotten, but there was a very bad recession in the early 90s. It arguably cost George Bush Sr. his reelection. It almost cost me my job, actually. One of my many jobs at that time, I was a word processor at Smith Barney. They called us all into a room one at a time. Some of us were told that we were being fired, laid off. Others were told that they would be able to stay. I was one of the lucky ones. I did not get fired, but a lot of other people did. A lot of people in the real estate business, because I had already started my real estate business. I was working on weekends as a word processor. During the week, I was a real estate agent, broker, trying to build my business. So I knew what was going on. Real estate just plummeted in New York. Donald Trump was one of these people that got caught in the downdraft. He lost a lot of money, but he was not the only one. He did not, well, here's one example, for instance, the Plaza Hotel. He had bought the Plaza Hotel because of what happened to him in the 90s, the recession. He had to sell the Plaza Hotel, but the Plaza Hotel recently, and I happened to be working with the sister of one of the gentlemen who is an investor in the Plaza Hotel today. So I know, and it was reported, the value today of the Plaza Hotel is much, much greater than it was when Donald Trump bought it. So that turned out to, he's made some bad investments, but that was an excellent investment. If he had not been forced to sell it, he would have made out like 100 bandits. It's just the way it goes. And that he was able to work his way out of $1 billion debt, he deserves congratulations, which is why he specifically mentioned it himself. Now, there's also this matter of profit and loss when you end up not paying any taxes. Well, of course, if you had losses, then you don't owe any taxes. If those losses carry over into future years, if you're in real estate, that's one of the advantages of real estate. You can write off those losses in future years. You can get back that money. So if you lost money one year, then you make money the next year. If you lose $1 million last year and you make $1 million this year, then your income is zero because you get to offset that. You have to keep in mind also that businesses keep two sets of records. They have one for investors and for the public and for the stock market if they're a public company, another one for their taxes. Now, for investors and the public, they want to show as much profit as possible. So if they make $1 million this year, they'll say, hey, I made $1 million this year, which is fair because when they lost $1 million a year before, they had to report that to the public. So they say, I made $1 million this year. But to the IRS, for their taxes, they're going to say, I didn't make any money because they're allowed to offset those losses. All businesses do that. It's nothing nefarious. For the public, they want to show as much profit as they can. For tax purposes, they want to show as little income as they can. It's just natural, and as I said, and as Judge Learned Hand made that very good point, everybody does it. It's perfectly legal. You are not obligated to pay more than the law requires you to pay just because some liberal doesn't like it, just because some liberal thinks you have too much money that you're obligated to give it to the government. You're not. Also during the 90s, he was on an allowance. The banks gave him $450,000 a month allowance, which is another important point about why Donald Trump was able to recover as he eventually did, because as I said, it was a recession. When the recession was over, then the value of Donald Trump's holdings, everybody talks about the casinos and the airline that failed and the football team that didn't make it. We can talk about that another time, but he owns a lot of properties. He owned a lot of properties. As the real estate market recovered in New York City, so did the value of his properties, and he was made whole again. But in that meantime, it's the old saying, if I owe you $100, I have a problem. If I owe you $1 million, you have a problem. And that's what happened in the 90s. Trump owed billions. These banks were owed billions of dollars. So they had two choices. Choice number one was to liquidate everything and take a terrible loss. Choice number two was to give Donald Trump $450,000 a month, keep him afloat basically until the value of those properties would go up again, and then the banks would be safe. So that's what he did. As I said, nothing wrong with anything Donald Trump did. It's all a big hoo-ha about nothing, another tactic to get people to hate Donald Trump for no reason. That's it for today. Glad you could stop by again. Thumbs up if you liked the video. Share it with your friends if you think they would benefit from my video. And subscribe so you don't miss future videos and so you make me look good to YouTube too. Why not? Comments below the video if you have any comments to make. Suggestions for future topics if you have any future topics. And that's it. Till next time. Bye.